Hey folks, this is Cindy. Thanks so much for stopping by. In today's video, I'm going to be bringing you something a little bit different. We're going to be doing a stamped gift bag. Now this gift bag is 100% DIY and I love projects like this. I love when I can actually put something together and truly make it my own, and these gift bags certainly fit the bill and they're actually relatively easy. Now I am using a large cling stamp to stamp all of my images on here, which does help a bunch. However, there is a lot of coloring involved in that. You don't have to choose anything like that's that involved. I just wanted to be able to use this stamp set, but we'll talk about that more here in a minute. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to score my cardstock so I can start to build my bag here. This is Neenah Solar White cardstock. It is 80 pounds and I have it running 11 inches by 8.5 inches. Now you could definitely use a heavier weight cardstock if you need to. I wasn't going to put anything too heavy in this. So 80 pounds worked just fine. I also needed to use Neenah because I knew that I was going to be doing some Copic coloring. You could use watercolor paper and do watercoloring on this. In some cases, you could even use a lightweight chipboard. It does take a little bit more manipulation, but it is totally doable. This, again, completely served my purposes today. I started by scoring this at 3/4 of an inch, then I moved it over to 4.5 inches, and I'm doing just enough pressure with my stylus here that I can get a nice clean fold. But I don't want to push too hard because I don't want to actually break through my paper. You would actually end up seeing that in the finished bag, and I don't want that to happen. I'm also using my Fiskars trimmer because I don't have a scoreboard that is big enough. My score buddy, I believe, is only 6 inches, so it's pretty small, and I definitely wanted to make sure that I had enough room to get that nice clean score line. I could probably use it and just rotate it, but this works out just great. If you have a scoreboard or anything like that, then definitely use that. All right, so now that I have all of my scored lines on running from 11 inches by 8.5 inches, I'm going to rotate it so it's going 8.5 by 11 inches, and I'm going to start scoring it that way. On this side, it is 2 inches, and then on the other side, it is 6.5 inches, or you can just rotate it and do 2 inches from each side. I am also going to have these dimensions listed over my blog, and I set it up for you so you could print it out. I know it's always helpful to be able to have something there right in front of you that you can see. You don't have to keep pulling up a video. You don't have to keep going back and forth and looking at it that way. So now that I have everything scored where I want it, I now need to put in where the gusset is going to go, where this actually folds up into a box. So I'm going in those corners there, and I'm using a pencil so I can make sure that my dimensions run correctly. And I'm going from the corner of that one score line up 2 inches, and then I will score it there. And I actually show you how I do that on my score buddy here in just a moment. And I have to apologize, folks. My Fiskars trimmer is big enough that I had to have it far enough away from me that I was kind of having a hard time seeing that far away where my lines were running. So I kept having to stick my head underneath the camera there, and I do apologize for that. So now that I have those marked off, I'm going to put this in my score buddy, and I'm going to score those as well. Now, with the score buddy, again, because mine is so small, I can't see where that line runs down the bottom of my whole sheet here. So I kind of have to do a little bit of guessing. It's fine. It works out. I rotate it so I can line up that top pencil mark there on one of these lines here. And I'm going to get it started, and I'm going to just kind of feel to see if it's actually going to score all the way down evenly. When I feel that it's not, I lift up the pressure on it and I just scoot my panel or my whole sheet over until I know that it's correct. That way I'm not scoring anything that I don't want to, and these lines run a perfect 2 inches. And then when I have those done, then I can start folding this up. Now at this point, you could not fold it and do your stamping. I prefer to fold it because I want to know exactly where I need to stamp and which side is going to be my front and which side is going to be my back. So I'm starting by folding in those inner folds. So you have 2 lines running across the top and the bottom of this at the 8.5 inch length. I'm going to leave those. Everything else can be folded. And I'm just reinforcing those with my bold folder. So at this point, you can see I have the 2 inches running on the inside of my sheet there. Now I can start folding in on the sides of my sheet. And again, anything there at the top and anything there at the bottom, I'm making sure that I don't score those just yet. That's where the fold is going to be for the top of our bag, and I don't need that scored. I want to be able to stamp on it. So here's where we start to build our gussets, and this can be kind of tricky. Hopefully I walked you through this well enough that you kind of get what I'm doing here. So I'm going to start with one of those triangles, and I'm going to bring it in towards the center. Now at this point, I don't have anything else folded on here. That being said, the only reason why I'm doing this is because I need those gussets to have enough give to them that when I actually start to build the box, they work perfectly. So this isn't technically how it's going to go together, but do this step anyways. Just trust me. What you actually need to do in order to build the box is fold those sides in and then bring those triangles back out towards the edge there. Now again, hopefully that makes sense to you. Sometimes I know it's really helpful to be able to have it sitting there in front of you where you can actually see what's going on. And you know that you'll have it right if you don't see those triangles on the outside of your box. So then I just did that on the other side of my box, and now everything is good to go. Now again, I still have those folds at the top there, and I'm going to leave those. I cannot stress to you enough how important it is that you leave those. Unless you don't plan on stamping on them at all, do not fold those just yet. Leave them perfect. Now, I just showed you where that would actually fold to the back, or it could be the front. At this point, you could choose whatever side you would like. I am not going to put too much pressure on those sides there. I don't want any creases in that. You could. I don't want to. I want to leave them where they still have that spring to them. But again, you could definitely fold those in. I'm also going to mark which side I want to be my front and which side I want to be my back. So when I lay this out flat to do my stamping, I know which side is which side. That certainly helps a bunch. And I just did that very lightly with a pencil, and I can erase it after I get all of my stamping done, which I'm going to be doing right now. I'm using my Memory Misty, and I'm using the Penny Black Sweet Perfume Cling Stamp. This is a large stamp, which is great because it covers a lot of surface at once, but it is a lot of coloring, folks, and you don't need to do this much coloring. You could definitely use any stamp set that works for you on any gift bag. I wanted to be able to use this cling stamp because it is gorgeous. I love it. I just hands down one of my favorite stamp sets in a long time. I'm also going to be using the Memory Misty because I do have a large sheet to work with here. If you don't have a Memory Misty, a Fisker's large stamp press would also work just as well. I'm going to be using the Ink on 3 Blackout ink. This is the first time I've used it. I love it. It is nice and crisp and black. This ink pad is a little on the juicy side, so that is kind of something to keep in mind, but I dig it. I think it worked out wonderfully. That sentiment is from Hero Arts. It's part of the mini Everyday Messages stamp set. Something else that I truly feel should be in your stash, folks. It is great sentiment stamp set, and this worked out great. I am going to be leaving the back of this blank. My daughter wanted to be able to write a message on it, so I didn't stamp anything there. You could totally do a full 360 design if you would like. I'm going to fold this up so you can see what it looks like it's stamped before it's colored in here, and see how you don't see those flaps on the outside of the box. That's what you want. You don't want those on the outside. They should be there on the inside. It's really not that hard to figure out. You might just have to play around with it a little bit. Doesn't matter how many times I make this. I always do it the wrong way first, so I have to unfold it and try again. No big deal. Okay, so now I'm ready to start coloring this, and I am pulling my color choices directly off the packaging. These Penny Black cling stamps. So they have a sample for you on them where they're pre-colored. It kind of gives you an idea of what colors you can use. I was actually making this bag for my daughter. She needed to give somebody a birthday gift and she really liked the colors. So I was drawing my inspiration from that, but I wanted to go much bolder, much deeper in my coloring. So I decided to choose my traditional reds, which is typically the R22, R24, R27, R29. Occasionally I'll throw in that R39 to really deepen it up. I could not find my R39. I am currently downsizing quite a bit of my craft room, so I have a lot of it packed up. It's a mess. I can't find a good majority of the things. Could not find my R39. I knew that the R29 wouldn't be dark enough, so I went to the next best thing. I'm using an R27, an R29, a BV23, and a BV25. Now, yes, I am going to be going over BVs with a red. You might have seen this before, and I believe I've shared this in a video recently, but in case you haven't, don't be surprised. When I get to the point where I start using my reds, when I start bringing in my reds, you're not even going to tell that these were blue violets. They're just going to read dark and they're just going to read as a shadow. And that's perfect. That's exactly what you want. It's always nice to be able to have a backup when you need it. And this is perfect. This is one of my favorite things to do. So I'm starting with that BV23 and I'm just going into the deepest shadow areas. Now, typically I'll map out with my lightest, and then I'll go to my darkest and start working my way back to my lightest. I'm not going to do that on any of this card. I don't need to. This will blend out just fine with all of the colors I'm using. Plus, there's so much to do here. I do not want to take that extra step. So immediately going in with my darkest shadow color. After I had all of that in there, now I'm bringing in my BV23 and I'm just blending out that BV25 just a wee bit more. You could probably skip the BV23. I think I can tell a difference when it's all colored in. You might not be able to tell in the video, but I think I can tell a difference on that BV23 with a BV25. And maybe you'll be able to see it here more in a minute when I start bringing in the R29. So I'm going to go right over the top of all of that BV23. And the trick is in 25, but the trick is you want to actually pull out that R29 further than what you had both of those BV colors. That R29 is actually going to act as a mid-tone. It seems dark, and typically an R29 is a darker color. But in this case, it's actually going to be our mid-tone. So when we go over the top of the BVs, it'll look real dark. And that's perfect. You want it to. And then once we bring it past that, it looks considerably lighter. And that's exactly what we want as well. It will read as a mid-tone. And then as you saw in the pictures, once it's all colored in, it just reads as a very rich, deep colored red flower. And that's what we're going for. So this is the R29, and hopefully you can see here where I bring that past those BVs where it lightens up quite a bit. Now, again, I can see the difference where I have that BV25 where I've blended it out to a BV23, bringing in that R29. It's just a wee bit lighter, and then going past the BV23 where it's even lighter yet. If you don't want to waste your time on that BV23, then totally skip it. It'll be just fine and it'll still look great. So I'm still trying to follow the shape of my flower here with this R29. Yes, this is my mid-tone, but I still need to follow the shape, especially since there's so much going on here. There's so much movement in this flower that it's super important that my lines follow the shapes of each of those petals. So I'm making sure I do that. And I'm also making sure that I'm leaving myself enough white space. So I showed you the R27, but I actually end up bringing in an R24. And by this point, I already know that I'm going to do that. You don't have to. That's a lot of markers. That is 5 markers for one flower. You don't have to do that. But in my mind's eye, what I was seeing is I really actually wanted quite a bit more contrast between those deep dark shadows and where I was going to leave those highlights. So I'm trying to leave myself enough white space, but I still want to see that R29. I still want to see some of that R27. So I'm kind of keeping that in mind as I go here. The other thing that I'm doing is I'm trying not to take in this whole flower as a whole. I'm going petal by petal. Now I am conscious of the fact that I have other things going on around me as I'm coloring in each of those petals. But overall, when I'm coloring a portion of this image, when I'm coloring a petal, that's all I'm looking at is that one petal. It helps a bunch so you don't get overwhelmed by the size of it. And I'm not going to lie, it takes a little bit of time to color. I can get through images like this fairly fast because this is what I do all the time. But at the end of the day, it's still a lot to take in. It's still a lot of work to do. And it's just better to focus on the small things so you don't get overwhelmed and you can totally enjoy the process that much more. Now at this point, I am bringing in the R27 and you can see where I have eaten up quite a bit of that highlight. That's fine. I'm still leaving myself enough that once I bring in my lightest color here, it's still going to read like it has highlight, like there is some movement to this. So I have things moving away from me and I have things moving towards me, and that's exactly what I'm going for. So this is the R22. I'm sorry, I think I might have said the R24, but this is actually the R22. And that's what I'm going to use for my highlight color. Now, once I get this on here, you're probably going to see a huge difference. I am not going over anything of the R29 or the BVs. I'm just sticking strictly to those highlights and a little bit of where I had put down that R27 because I need those to blend. Everything else, I don't need to touch it. I don't want to lift any of that color. It'll be just fine. I'm also not doing anything particular in terms of technique with the R22. I'm just filling in those spaces and calling good. I want to saturate the paper with that ink. That's all I care about. It doesn't need to be anything special there. So now that we have that done, we can move on. That was a lot of coloring. So now we can move on. Everything else, surprisingly enough, is on the downhill slide. This is actually really easy going forward. So the next thing I'm going to color is I'm going to color this flower here in front. Now I had just talked about, kind of not focusing on everything at once. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. When I work on images like this, so I have a full background full of flowers, there's so much going on. When I'm ready to move on to the next thing, I just let my eye drift. And the first thing that catches my eye is going to be the next thing that I color. And that's what I did here. So the next thing that stood out to me was this really large flower. Now on the packaging, this is a nice pale yellow. I want it to go a little bit darker. Yellows can be a kind of tricky to color in. Now I have talked before about desaturating as opposed to saturating. I decided not to do that here. You totally could. You could use a V12 with the Y38, 35, and 32. I'm going to use a YR24 with the YR38, 35, and 32. I like the richness of the YR24. It doesn't take it too dark. I probably could have gone a little bit darker with this flower, but I love how rich it is when it's all finished off. And it definitely complements that big, gorgeous red flower when everything is all said and done. This one, I am mapping out my shadows with my darkest color. Again, I'm not going to worry about my usual technique. I'm going straight to dark, working my way back out to light. Once I have those mapped out, and I was really, really conservative with that R24. I was just getting into those nooks and crannies in the folds with that, and that was it. Now I have the Y38, and I'm stretching that out a little bit more. This is my second darkest color, and I do want the inside of this flower to read like it's pretty deep because I want those petals to look like they're coming up and blooming out, especially because I have some coloring to do right there on the inside of that. So I really want to play up that shape. So I am trying to reinforce that the center of this flower is pretty deep here. So I'm going to stretch out more of that Y38 than what I did with the YR24 before I bring in my next color. Now I am trying to make sure that I leave myself plenty of highlight, because I definitely, this flower sits right here up front. It needs to read like it has plenty of light coming at it. Once I had the Y38 done, I'm bringing in the Y34. And again, just stretching those out a little bit more, blending that in. I am losing some of that YR24. I don't show you on camera, but once I have this flower completely colored in, including the center, I do bring in that YR24 a little bit, and I just kind of touch up the center a little bit. I don't blend it out. I just kind of bring in a few flicks here and there, make sure it's pretty dark in there, and then I call it good. So the rest of the flowers on this bag are colored in the same exact way as I colored in this yellow flower, except I changed the colors up a little bit. I do color some blue ones, and then I'm going to color a few white, and I'll explain those when I get there. The blue is actually pretty easy to understand because it's the same technique as this. It's nothing fancy. Okay, so let's talk about the stamp set for a moment here. This is the Penny Black Sweet Perfume Cling Stamp, and I love, love, love the stamp set because it's kind of an all-in-one deal. You get all of these gorgeous images, and you only need to stamp it once. It's pretty big. You could probably tell it'd probably fill up the entire front of a card panel, but I love that. There are other options for you. I have some of those listed over on my blog if you're interested in those, but do be sure to go check out these Penny Black stamps. I got this from Vanessa at Butterfly Reflections Inc. She's one of my biggest enablers. In fact, it's not uncommon for me to get a Facebook message with a picture attached to it, and then the next thing I know, I'm buying more stamp sets, but it's cool. Definitely go check these out. They're totally worth it. So I'm just going to finish up this flower here, and then I am going to work on those blue flowers. I'm leaving the white ones for last, and I'll talk about that here more in a minute. For my blue flowers, I'm going to be using the B18, B14, and B12. As soon as I start coloring that, you're going to see that I actually bring in a BV25. I decided that BV18, it was reading a little too bright blue. I do want these a deeper, darker blue because they need to blend in with that deep red and that darker yellow. And the BV25 actually is perfect for that. If you have a deeper blue that you could use underneath the B18, definitely use that. If you have a deeper blue combination altogether, definitely use that. But this BV25, again, this is a great marker to have, folks. It definitely helps out a bunch to get those deeper, darker shadow colors. So after I have all of those flowers mapped out with the BV25, I am bringing in that B18, and I'm going to bring that out just a wee bit more. Again, it's the same thing I did on all of my other flowers. I need to stretch that out a little bit more because this is going to be it's my second to darkest color, but it's kind of going to be one of my midtones. I need this to read pretty dark. Once I have the B18 where I want it, I'm bringing in the B14, and then I'm going to finish that off with the B12. I don't leave a whole bunch of highlight on any of these. Again, I want it to read pretty dark. I also followed the packaging for which ones of these I was going to color in which colors. So I lightly took a pencil, and on these blue flowers right towards the center, I lightly marked it with a B. I knew that these were going to be dark enough that you wouldn't be able to see it, but I needed to make sure that I was going to color the correct ones in blue and leave the other ones white. Now I'm going to color in these larger leaves here in the green, my favorite green combination. This is the G12, G14, G17, G29. I mapped that out with the G29, blending it out with the G17. I'll go in with that G14, finish it off with the G12. With that G12, I go from the edges towards the center, not the center towards the edges, because I don't want to lose any of that color that I had put in with the other three. And I like leaving that variation in there. So that's why I do it that way. I also chose that green combination because you could bring in a yellow green if you would like, but I wanted this to read a more true green because I also knew that I was going to be coloring in those little tiny leaves in a blue green. I chose the blue green because if you look at the color wheel and if you set an arrow on the red, because that's the largest image I have on my card panel here, is that red. That's the first thing that your eye is drawn to. So if you looked at a color wheel, set an arrow on red, everything opposite of that would actually be complementary colors to that red. So this color scheme actually works out well, regardless of which image you choose to color which. But blue-green is a part of that. So I knew that I could color these little guys in a blue-green. It would look really well. Again, you could use a yellow-green or you could use a yellow-green on your leaves. I just wanted it to read a little bit darker, a little bit more true. Hopefully that makes sense. So now I'm going to color in my white flowers. I left these for last. So if I accidentally colored anything in the other colors on these flowers that I didn't mean to, I could bring in my colorless blender, work that out, and then I would have a nice, clean white flowers. That's the only reason why I save these for last. If you're careful enough, you could do these anytime you'd like, but that's always a tried and true trick for me. So I started with my C5, mapped out my shadow areas. I'm bringing in the C3, stretching that out just a little bit, and then I'm going to go directly to my C00, and I'm going to call it good with those. I do make sure that I leave true, legitimate white on those flowers. Since they are next to much darker colors, they're actually going to read white as opposed to gray. So now I can move on to the finishing touches on my bag here. I started with the Uniball white Signo gel pen, and I filled in the stamen of those that red flower there. I made sure when I colored it that I kept everything on the stamen pretty clean, but I actually want to use that white gel pen because I'm going to be bringing in a yellow Sakura glaze pen, and I wanted that yellow to pop just a little bit more, and having that white gel pen underneath it definitely does the trick there. I'm also going to be using my Prismacolor white pencil here to add the highlights to those little itty bitty flowers on the center here of the yellow flower. I'm sorry you didn't get to see me color that in. It's actually really easy. These are so tiny. It doesn't take a whole lot to color them in. I colored the very center red with the same reds as I did the big flower. The blue is the same blue as the other flowers. That's pretty much what it looks like on the packaging, so I decided not to change it, just keep with the same colors and call it good. I added those highlights with the Prismacolor because they are so tiny I can get in there with the tip of that pencil, and then I'm going to call that good. Now, here's where I bring in that yellow Sakura glaze pen, and I'm just going over the top of what I had colored with the Uniball white gel pen, and I'm trying to make sure that I allow this color to pool up pretty well, because when it dries, I want it to dry with a little bit of dimension to it. So I am making sure that I'm putting just enough pressure on the ball of that pen that the gel pen actually flows out pretty well. I'm also going to be adding some of this to the center of those white flowers. And on the blue flowers, I colored those in red. It's kind of hard to see, but I do go in with a clear, Sakura clear gel pen, and I add a little bit of dimension in that too. Now, the last thing that I want to do before I call it good with this, actually, this is second to last thing. I want to add a drop shadow to this. Now, at this point, you have done a load of coloring and you could totally stop here. I love me a good drop shadow. So everything I do has to have a drop shadow. This is no different, and it looks awesome when it's done. So I'm mapping this out with my darkest color. This is my C5. If you follow me, you've seen this before. If you're new here, this is how I do it. I'm mapping this out with my C5. Now, typically, I try to keep my drop shadow pretty thin. I'm totally not going to on this. This is a big, huge image. Plus, it's the shape of the bag. I can afford to put a really solid drop shadow on there, so I'm doing that. I use much more of the side of my marker than I typically do. Added that C5, now I'm blending it out with the C3. Hopefully you can see how far over I have my C3 there. Normally you probably can't see it because I'm holding it so upright that my hand blocks it, but this time I'm just going from the gold. I am definitely adding on these colors. So after I had my C3 done, I'm coming in with my C1, blending that out, and then I will bring in my C00 and my colorless blender, and then I'll call it good. At this point, you could definitely leave this bag. You do not need to add anything else to it. I end up bringing in some Nuvo Aqua Shimmer because I really felt that this needed all the glitter. So I do end up bringing in that, but you don't have to, folks. You could definitely call it good, fold it up, put your little goodies inside it and call it good. So I mentioned earlier that I was leaving the back of this blank. You could definitely stamp on the back of this with like a to or from. If you have like some sort of frame stamp, you could do that. My daughter wanted to leave this blank so she could write a note. I did, when I stamped this, I did make sure that I left myself enough room for a sentiment. That being said, you could totally center the stamp on the front of this bag and then save your sentiment for the back. I like how that sentiment runs up along the edge there. So after I had everything colored, all of my embellishments were on here. I folded it up. Now I'm going to start tying this up. If you have just a regular clip, you could use that. I wanted to be able to finish this off with some twine. I have a monster roll of May Arts natural twine, and I love this stuff. I think it looks so beautiful with almost anything. So I'm going to use that. Now I'm not going to cut anything off these flaps, but you could. That back side there where the flap is, you could cut that off and just have the front. So the front of it would fold over, and then I'll show you here in a minute the next step. So you would just have the front folded over, and then you would punch the holes in the back side that I'm going to show you here in a minute, and then you could tie it that way. I'm going to leave it all there. I like having that extra side to the flap. Even though it's a little bit more bulky, I like having that extra side because I feel like it adds just a little bit more stability. So I used a regular paper punch. I punched the holes where I wanted them to. I just eyeballed them, nothing fancy there. I'm taking a pencil and I'm tracing where I want those holes to go, because I'm going to take that hole punch again and I'm going to punch on the inside of this bag here. So right there on the inside of the bag. So I can actually get this nice and secure when I add the twine on there. Now, I don't know why, but I was looking at this bag like, what is going on? It was totally me. Like, never mind. I don't even know what my problem was. So anyways, I'm punching the holes in this bag, and then I can start adding the twine to it. As far as the amount of twine, I had it strung out. I think I have like about 36 inches here because I wanted to give myself plenty of room to make sure that I could tie it up and add a nice bow to it. Again, you could use anything you want. A clip would work just fine. A ribbon would be fine. But this twine works out great. So I'm starting on the inside of the bag. I'm adding that twine so it works its way towards the outside of the bag. I have it going through the holes that are inside the bag, plus that back flap there. Now I'm going to pick one of those up and I'm going to bring it right up underneath that front flap. So it's technically going from the inside out of that front flap. You're not going to be able to see the twine on the outside just yet, except for what is hanging down there, and that's fine. That's perfect. That's what we need. I am also going to crisscross this and just do a loose cross here. I'm not going to secure it. You probably could at this point, but your flap isn't going to stay down. But I need to make sure that I have enough tension on this that when I bring this twine around to the front side, that I can get it nice and secure and that flap stays down. Now, I'm doing my best to do this on camera, but I actually end up having to bring it closer to me. I get it secured. I attach my tweezers here. These are tension tweezers, and it holds it nice and tight. And then I can tie my bow. So you don't definitely make sure that you've got it close enough that you can work with it a little bit easier. Once I have my bow to the size that I want it, I trim off the extra of that tail, and that is it, folks. We're done. We're good to go. I really enjoy making projects like this. I like being able to put something really special together and kind of make it my own thing and create that wow factor. I just love it. And these bags are actually really easy to put together. Again, I have all of the dimensions for you over there on my blog. You can print those out and have them for your reference. You can put these bags together anytime you want. You could use any kind of stamp you want. The Penny Black Sweet Perfume, a cling stamp, was perfect for this, and I thoroughly enjoyed all of the coloring. That is it, folks. We are done. We are good to go. I hope you enjoyed my project today. If you did, hit that like button and share it with your friends. Also, be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and tap that bell next to the subscribe button so you can receive all future notifications. Thanks again so much for stopping by. Until next time.